In step two, we are going to be assessing the risks. Assessing the risks can be done by various techniques. Scenario analysis is one of them. A risk assessment form is another. A risk severity matrix is the third one. Failure mode and effects analysis is the fourth one. And probability analysis is the fifth one. In the scenario analysis, you assess the significance of each risk in terms of probability and impact. And it is pretty much the same as the failure mode analysis. Here you'd have one more factor, which is the detection. Okay, let's talk about these various types of risk assessment. So we're going to take the negative impacts only in this area. This is the defined conditions for impact scales of a risk of a major project. So if you take a project objective as cost, time, scope, and quality, let's take cost. Cost-wise, in the numerical scale or relative scale, very low risk is going to be insignificant cost increase, whereas very high risk is going to be greater than 40% cost increase. These are numbers like 20, 40, and 40 and things like that. These are numbers that you come up with for your particular project. It's not a rule of thumb, it's not heuristics or anything like that. So you can sort of see in a relative way whether the risks, when they are very low risks, what is the impact? And if it is a high or a very high risk, what are the impacts? And you can do that for time, you can do that for scope, and you can do that for quality. The risk assessment form can be done using the likelihood, impact, and detection difficulty. So let's say this. The system freezes over and over again, right? When you're doing the development of a system or an application, you'll see the computer freeze. So if that risk takes place when you give it to a customer, that's going to be pretty bad, right? So you want to avoid that. So let's see how you can avoid that. This happens when you are starting up, and the likelihood is 2. How do you get this number? You sit as a team and you come out with saying, over a period of time, with all the experiences that the experts have, that you have put together, the team as a team, you as a team can come out saying the likelihood could be 2 out of 5. So you can have a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 and say what is the likelihood. You can also say what is the impact if it happens. The impact can be medium high. It's not very high. So you can have a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being very high. And you can say 5 means very high. Or you can have a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is very high, 5 is in the middle, and 1 is low. Or medium. So you can put your scales any way you want to, and you can say the likelihood, impact, and the detection difficulty is how difficult it is to detect. You can come up with the similar scales and come up with that. So for each risk event, you can come up with a likelihood, impact, detection difficulty, and when you can see these risks. Based on this, based on this risk assessment form, you can come out with a risk severity matrix. So the risk value is going to be the impact times probability times detection. So let's take a look at it. So the impact times detection times likelihood. That's what we said, right? Likelihood is a probability. So 2 times 5 times 5 is 50. 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. 4 times 3 is 12 times 3 is 36. 1 times 5 times 5 is 25. So you're seeing the interface problems are 64, 50, 36, 25. So you have interface problems, 64, 64, 50, 36, 25. So now you can see that the major risk, the impact, is going to be the interface problems will be 64. The interface problems is 64, right? So the interface problems are 64, that is the highest number that you got. So that'll be the major risks. Systems freezing is 60, that is also major. But the likelihood here is 2. The likelihood for the interface problem is 4. So you can create this factor, all these factors, and put together a risk severity matrix, and then you can make this red in color, this yellow in color, this is green in color. The ones which are green in color do not have that much of an impact. The one in the yellow color has medium impact, and the one in the red has got high impact, or the major risks. So now you know, just by looking at this, you know that user backlash and hardware malfunctioning is less of a problem as far as risks are concerned compared to the interface problems and systems freezing. So you can pay more attention to these two and see how to mitigate those two risks. And then you can say, if this one happens, we'll have some kind of contingency plan. Mitigating risk is to reduce the likelihood that the event will occur. It reduces the impact that the adverse event would have on the project. Avoiding risk is changing the risk plan to eliminate the risk or condition. Transferring risk is passing the risk to somebody else. Okay. So in a fixed price contract, you avoid the risks of cost escalation by giving the fixed price contract to the contractor. So if the cost goes up, then the contractor is going to pay the money, the extra money. You are not at risk. So that's how you transfer the risk using these fixed price contracts. Escalating risk is notifying the appropriate people within the organization of the threat. And the last one is making a conscious decision to accept the risk. So there are some risks that you cannot avoid. It is going to happen. It is going to happen. You have to make a decision to accept that risk and move on. And make sure that you do the project to your maximum effort to in any way to mitigate any kind of risk happening later on. So project managers use what is called contingency planning. Contingency planning is an alternate plan that can be used if a risk event happens. So, in case a risk event happens, you are prepared with some kind of an alternate plan, and that is contingency plan. It's a plan of action, and it is not a part of the implementation plan. It goes into effect only when the risk is recognized or when you see the risk happening. Risks of absence of a contingency plan can be disastrous. It can cause a manager to delay or postpone the decision to implement a remedy. That means you're letting the risk happen and you're going to face the brunt of it later on. It might lead to panic and acceptance of the first remedy suggested, which is not the right thing to do. Because let's say you don't have a contingency plan, so some risk happens, you meet, and you come up with a plan. That plan may not be the right plan if you had thought about this long before, because you have given enough thoughts. Here you are acting in panic in an emergency situation. So that risk mitigation may not be the best one. Making the decisions under pressure can always be dangerous and always be costly. A risk response matrix looks like this. So you have a risk event, for instance, system freezing. The response is you want to mitigate it. And how do you mitigate it? You want to test the prototype thoroughly. The contingency plan is if it happens, then you have an operating system ready so you can reinstall the operating system. The trigger is still frozen after 1 hour. And who is responsible? EMI is going to be responsible for that. So you can give a risk response matrix to your team members, and they can work with these kinds of events and responses and contingency plans, and when the trigger happens and who is responsible for it. Technical risks or backup strategies if chosen technology fails. If technical uncertainties can be resolved, it can be assessed. Scheduling risks basically look at expediting or crashing the project to get back on track. Schedule activities in parallel and use start to lag relationships. Use the best people for high risk tasks. Cost risk wise, you review the price to avoid the trap of using one lump sum to cover price risks. Funding risks or evaluate the risks of reduction in funding. That means a cut in the project. As far as opportunity management is concerned, opportunity is an event that can have positive impact on project objectives. You can seek to eliminate the uncertainty associated with an opportunity, and that is by exploiting it. You can allocate some or all of the ownership of an opportunity to another party who can capture that opportunity. That is sharing. You can take actions to increase the probability or positive impact of an opportunity. That means you're enhancing it. You can notify the appropriate people of the organization of the opportunity, and that means you escalate the situation. You must, if you are willing to take advantage of the opportunity as it occurs, but not taking any action to pursue it, you're accepting it, but you're not doing anything about it. To cover contingency plans, you need to have contingency funds. These contingency funds are to cover project risks.